Hello, good evening to all. We are resuming the public sharings. Today is the sharing of May 3rd. We are here back to the Northern Hemisphere. So until we reach an intermediary point of the time of Brazil, with the time of Brazil, we are going to record the sharing and we are not going to make it live, otherwise it would be too late in Portugal if it's 7 p.m. Brasilia time. So we are going to keep the time for now, and then we'll see if we have to adjust something. The theme of today says responses that we all need and reflections that we do not always make. It's not a word play, so let us try to enter the rhythm of this title, so that we can see if we are not before a potential that we cannot identify, if we are tied to something of the past that we cannot let go, and let us make some reflections. Before this, we have some questions and some topics that could help us, that will compose the beginning of the sharing of today. The person says, when we go through karmas, tests, difficult situations, illnesses, right away, or there is a thought form that is right away connected to karma. Now, great beings who passed on the planet, have been on the planet, Buddha, Christ, the Virgin Mary, so many beings who came to this human life like ours, was everything that they experienced also their karma, or how could this be understood? You see, at the beginning of the year we had a cycle having the esoteric glossary as a base. And there is a very important entry in this glossary, which is the entry logos, and also the entry levels of consciousness. So we, normal human beings, have some levels of consciousness that are relatively active, and these consciousnesses that we have mentioned here, Christ, Mary, Buddha, among so many others, they have on the higher levels of their consciousness not only active, but in a permanent state of communion that is much broader than us. So they don't experience certain levels of duality, and they do not experience the need of self-ego and individualistic need of self-assertion like we experience. Because they are spirits who are awake to other degrees of evolution. Having said this, depending on the level of consciousness of a being, they interact with this anchor of universal consciousness within a planet, which we call planetary locus, in a different way. So the Christ, mainly the Christ, is as if he assumed this whole learning experience of Christic love and redemption for the planet, for this to go through a synthesis. This is a very broad subject that we won't develop very much today. We could do this at some point. Eventually I study only about that which we call the Passion of the Christ, because it is really a condensation of universal evolution that we still have not understood, because if we had understood, our lives would be totally different, and also our relationship. But this is not the subject for today. So going back to the context, these great consciousnesses absorb, assume, offer themselves to make a synthesis in the process of the planetary locus. This is important because all life develops on the planet, including the life of humanity and other kingdoms, It is within this schedule or plan or purpose that we call the planetary logos. So it's a different level of karma. It's not the same level and understanding of our individual karma. They are consciousnesses who have an evolutionary possibility, a degree of love, wisdom, of will and light, which is not the same of a common consciousness like ours. It doesn't fail to be a sort of karmic interaction, what they experience and live for the planet, but not from the same perspective that we understand this. It's a union with the process of the logos and humanity of the races as a whole, and therefore the words of these great instructors, their life examples, their sacrifice, which is a word that is not well understood by us, as it's always associated with suffering, when it's true, in truth it is to make life sacred, a transmutation of that which is trivial, common and superficial to a higher perspective, right? Someone else says, what would be the spiritual meaning of the experience of childhood? Once old souls, younger souls or young people, souls with less incarnations, regardless of the commitments with evolutionary forces, they all go through the stage of the material plane. So how is the help to these beings when they go through this stage of incarnation? And would be childhood a window of opportunity to the atonement of faults? You see, in the logic, let us call it like this, of classic spiritual science, I'm referring to the Tibetan, to Theosophy, the beginning of great religions, that is, everything that is in a precise way connected with the source, which is the legacy of the hierarchy. This is the true source, which is this sequence, let us say, of learning experiences that the hierarchy has materialized on the planet. So many evolutionary currents have brought many pieces of instruction connected to the theme of childhood and the cycles of 7 years, with the understanding that at every 7 years we go through a cycle of learning experience, especially of the formation of our 3 material bodies: physical, etherical, physical, emotional, and mental. So within this logic, childhood is located in this cycle, the first 7 years. There is a group of understandings that is very important, that are very important for us. But the fact is that with the Second World War, something happened that the Tibetan revealed through Alice Bailey, something that is very important and significant, and that still splits, that still leaves leftovers, with the breakage of the veil, of this veil, many non-resolved situations of a degree of darkness and dissociation and disorganization that had not been foreseen to enter the planet at that moment, but rather in 88, not at the moment of the Second World War. This disorganized the inner planes. So as humanity, as a planet, we saw ourselves with an evolutionary pressure that is considerable and did not find expansion of the consciousness that had been foreseen to be developed still in that time until 1988. So in this gap of 40 years and something, humanity saw itself under the precipitation of a certain of impulse and influence which humanity was not prepared to deal with. And I'm referring to this in this context because the incarnations are organized by a group of consciousnesses with the participation of this level that we call the soul level, the consciousness that accompanies the incarnation of each one of us, the guardian angel, and especially by the wisdom of councils and this level of hierarchy that we call the lords of the karma. So up to that moment, incarnations were following a certain accompaniment, a certain logic, but one of the most nefast interferences, we could use this word in this context, after the Second Great World War, is that souls began to receive a very great pressure from those evolutionary forces, that the forces that had thirst for the experience for material life, and that did not fulfill, let us say, that cycle of restoration, healing, learning experience that would take place between incarnations. So before this moment, we would disincarnate, we would be received on the inner planes, we would be helped to make synthesis on the etherical physical plane of the previous experience to accommodate and prepare for our next incarnation. We have a time to choose. It's a real word in this context, to choose that family, nation, environment, karma, which would provide our best learning experience for the following situation. But with the entrance of this great amount of evolutionary forces, this caused a lot of disturbance, because souls saw themselves without that possibility of controlling their higher vehicles, referring to the astral and mental bodies, that were there mixed. Souls were very much mixed with forces that were thirsty for the experience on matter. So the soul would not go through a process of renewal, and then they would enter this process of incarnation and go through a very disturbed childhood, oftentimes in places that would not be the same choice of those consciousnesses that I mentioned before, of councils, lords of karma, our soul itself. So this caused a huge disturbance in this process that we call childhood. I'm referring to this chronological time after the Second World War. Now, what is the spiritual meaning? First of all, is that incarnation is not a punishment. To incarnate here is not a punishment for an experience or a learning experience that is less evolutionary that we may have had in the universe or even on the planet. It's an opportunity to follow our learning experience within the school that this planet represents. Therefore, it's a sequence, it's one more ring of our, in the chain of our evolutionary experience. So the meaning, the current meaning, is that we have to go through this stage to refine gradually in the family environment that we incarnate a sort of impulse or stimulus that will give continuity to the point we stop from the previous incarnation. This is why we incarnate in a family that was not chosen by our soul or the lords of karma, but it was a choice from our astral body, for example, influenced by an evolutionary force that needed an experience in matter. So our incarnation begins right away disturbed because we feel strangers in that environment. On the other hand, our material vehicles are being built in that family environment in a nation that eventually wouldn't be the nation that our guardian angel would incarnate, better saying, would indicate our soul to incarnate. And then a whole confusion begins. So if the soul is older, in the context of the question of the person, the soul has more experience to make good use even that this favorable situation of not following a higher indication for this incarnation, and the soul transforms this into a learning experience, but generally they are very painful childhoods, because they are the values that the old soul holds within do not coincide that the family environment develops. Can you follow? So it causes a sort of dissociation in the soul. So in a node soul, this has less impact, and it is seen by the soul as a possibility, opportunity of confirming what it has of the best. But for a young soul, it could be a situation and reason for a lot of dissociation and being compromised, having the incarnation compromised. So this is a very important topic, and we need to deepen very much into this for us to have an experience here as we are having, and accompanying those who are in the situation in a more luminous way. You see, yesterday I arrived from Angola. We have one of the activities of this work, which are the humanitarian missions, and I was in Angola. And the last day before we came back, I had this topic very much in mind. This topic of learning experience that these souls go through. One of our activities we have is with our orphanage, that we have more 200 individuals between babies, children, teenagers, adults of the first stage, and we see how these souls go through an experience that is completely different to what we can imagine. Souls that incarnate with a thought form of magic, or the thought form of condemnation. Consciousnesses who are violated in their own homes, who live at the streets, they are abandoned, rejected. You see, it's a sort of learning experience that we cannot imagine. And it's very necessary for us to be before this as a work and service and learning experience, because we redimension our crisis very much. And when we look at those gazes of those children and young people, what is the future of a soul like this? What is the learning experience they are going through? So our action before this is very much in the sense of empathically, with compassion, unite with that learning experience, can you follow it? And not wanting to soften the learning experience. So it's something important. It's an important learning experience, because if we are mistaken and we paralyzed into the immediate and material help, we lose the perspective of uniting, joining that learning experience for this to be constructive and evolutionary regardless of the material result. So you see how important it is to always deepen and look for a deeper meaning than the immediate results that we could even make the situation worsen, in the sense of the search for a meaning for that, all of that. Well, continuing with this theme, responses that we all need and reflections that we do not always make, let us also enter the next sharings into the theme of dreams, the symbolic life. Because we spend practically 1/3 or 1/4 of our lives sleeping. And are our lives interrupted at the moment we sleep? Where does our consciousness go to? And what is our aspiration to learn with this process? Do we give value to this? Do we give the due attention to this? Are we attentive to the states of consciousness, the impulses that come after a dream and after the contact with a symbol? So a symbol and symbolic life of dreams, it's important, places us before an impulse, a rhythm, a meaning, under a language that is very different from the rational language. Are we really awake? Are we before something? Or we always face the same number or the same sequence of numbers or the same name or the same color? Or when we are before a color, this brings a certain sensation. Some people, and I am one of them, when I feel smell some aromas, this right away activates many memories, and this brings a state of consciousness. So we are surrounded with symbols, constantly surrounded with symbols. For example, flight or buses ticket, or a bill to pay that value, that number. So our lives, even common life, of everyday life, can be used by this great universal wisdom to help us come out of this such a automatic and concrete relationship with things. We are going to give an example here of someone's dream that is very important and very interesting. And the person knows, better saying, we know when we have a dream that is symbolic, because this touches us and it stays there, resounding, it comes back. Generally, we become aware of this, a part of this. If we could be more open to this theme of symbolic life, eventually that which we call etheric dream, which is where dreams take place, it could be projected into the physical brain and the physical memory of the brain, and we would be able to remember this much more. But as we don't give attention to this, there is a dissociation of our etheric brain, which is this part of our structure, physical etheric structure, that has more contact with subtle bodies, especially the astral mental planes and our inner world. But as we don't give the due attention to this, as we don't love this process of symbolic life, again, this is not an emotional movement of sentimental movement of love. It is our including this. Love, inclusion have the same meaning. So if at this precise moment I include the perspective of symbolic life, to my right side I have 4 people, to my left side I have 5 people, this is a symbol, and in the center a person. If I am before this without hurry, without anxiety, without restlessnesses, this symbol begins to communicate with me. Am I clear? So in this communication, the rhythm of that symbol begins to bring to my consciousness a stimulation to transform something or expand my consciousness. Why do these 5 people choose to sit to this side and not that side? It's not a rational question. Am I clear? It's a reflection that brings a meaning, an inner sense, and if this sense emerges, the benefit for the understanding of this is for all of us who are here in the room, even in our unconsciousness. So let us imagine if all of us present here had the same aspiration for symbolic life. At some level, the essence of this would reach all of us. So you see, this person had the following dream. She's the wife of someone, so she dreams she's going up through stairs with small stairs, narrow stairs, short distance between one stair and another. And oftentimes the stairs end when they touch the ceiling, giving a sensation of suffocation and asphyxiation. So she doesn't end up in a window or a door, but the ceiling, bringing this sensation. So you see, it's a very important dream. Let us imagine ourselves when we are going to share dreams here. It's important that we don't become disinterested in someone else's dream. But it's symbolic life trying to bring a different impulse to us. that could even correspond to an experience that we are having. So when we are before this symbol of short stairs and sequential stairs that lead us to the ceiling, it's a symbol that to this step, to this moment, taking short steps. The stair also represents a cycle, short stairs that you don't make so much effort. So short progresses, controlled processes. All of this is related to the sort of stair that the person was seeing. So maybe the moment has come for this person to consider if they should not look for a different sort of stair, to make a greater effort, and not though that stairs with short steps. So you see, when we reach a moment of taking greater steps in our consciousness and making a different sort of effort, eventually we have a symbol like this, and it leads us to a ceiling. The ceiling is you have reached the maximum that this sort of attitude and effort and process allows. Now it's necessary to have a different sort of yoga, a different sort of stair, and another size of stair, of steps. So it's a very interesting symbol, dream, a way related to the way our consciousness is in this whole process. Really very interesting. And here someone asks if we could deepen into the theme of the 3 months cycles, which has been deepened, and it's in the esoteric glossary and refer to the date August 8th. Yes, in the next sharing we are going to deal with this content. And lastly, here to continue with the theme of the sharing of today, someone asks how to diminish the dichotomy between that which we preach, that which we know, and that which we really live. You see, we have to be careful because our minds are very immediatist. So there is a warning in the question of the person. It's a very authentic reflection, but we have to understand that everything we know or everything we preach is also a process, that there is a learning experience together linked to this. And this learning experience in the evolutionary rhythm of this dual universe where we live, matter and spirit, it's always divided into cycles or stages of processes, rhythms. So, let us give an extreme example. A teaching of Buddha, for example, that our minds tend to dissociation and dissociated narrative. So when Buddha says this, he's always experiencing on his level, obviously, the same dissociation. So it's not when we preach or when we are sharing some degree of instruction, and the word preach is very strong, but that we are there sharing something. We are lords of that. We are practicing, we are sharing a sort of impulse, and there's a key here that should always be permeated with that degree that we are experiencing that. This is the point. Now, if we don't accept this humbly, we could share what we experience, or that degree of matrix that we manage to contact every time. It's our task, let us say, to instruct or preach, that, which is the word that the person used here. But we are going to bring this to our day-to-day, and it's useful to all of us. And when we are projecting or even demanding a behavior, and the distance that between this and what we truly live, there should emerge there the love for being true. And if we are aware that all the processes within this logic of the universe where we are is always a gradual process, it's always a process within a cycle, harmony within this, or truth within this, is that we should always share or preach what we know in the proportion that we are trying to live and that we have managed to live. So this true, sincere and authentic effort that we try to live within this brings us a very great adaptation and a wisdom to perceive that moment in which we definitively speak does not correspond at all to that which we live. So we have to be very careful with this. So you see, when we know that this distance gradually diminishes, it's when we are doing a work in our consciousness under a certain situation, aspect, whatever it is, a process that has to be arranged between conscious effort for our self-contenance and self-transformation, and trust that the greatest part is going to be made by this one consciousness, or the energy, as we say. So if we are doing this work over ourselves and trying to live that part, or in that proportion, authentic proportion that we know that we can manifest, when there is an impulse of that which in the world generally, or some religious movements, is called a temptation, or an impulse that before used to disturb us, this will no longer touch us. So it's a meaning that we were devoutly and striving with effort. One day this will come back to us and will call our attention, and this will no longer touch us. It's a meaning that the energy, the universe, has made its part. So, as an analogy, when we are before this movement of wisdom and sharing something, we should always try to live in the question of the person, that which authentically in us corresponds to that which we can live, and a little bit more, and place a tone in the tone of effort of the process itself. So the process is subtle, but we have to be very careful with the energy of demand for something that does not correspond to the effort we are doing. This is the dichotomy, because an energy comes of incoherence and other people can feel this. So we have to be very attentive to this point of balance between that which we already live authentically and what we share with others. Well, we are going to reflect here on some of these answers that we all need, and eventually some reflections that we do not always make. Because one of the evolutionary forces that implanted itself the most in humanity in this race of ours is inertia, passivity of always thinking that the solution is not available at the present moment, or that the solution or the understanding or some learning experience that we need is not accessible. So we always think that we are lacking something, that the present moment is never enough. So we become very much absent from a learning experience that is present here now. Make the experience now, at this precise moment. How many of you are really present here? Not present physically or looking at the television or the internet, but present, sharing this flow, this rhythm, this impulse, and open so that it may come to our consciousness, to the consciousness of each one of us, these answers, these responses. So an instructor used to say, a very illuminated work called Agni Yoga, that we receive hundreds of indications a day, but we are not attentive. We don't see each moment. Perhaps the last, we don't know when our last moment is, when an impulse will come. And why is this like this? So we all need responses, but we don't always make reflections. So you see, an example of this. Sometimes we look for a meaning for compulsory relationships. Why is my father like this? Why is my grandfather like this? Why is my mother like this? Why do I have these siblings? Why was I born in this nation? Why do I have this body? Why I have this relationship with my body now? Questions of compulsory relationships. So it's a response that we all need initially, right? Now, facing these relationships, where does this question come from? Does this question come from really wanting to learn, looking for the meaning for this, to rediscover and trust that this wisdom that organizes our incarnation exists? Or it comes from a place, from a personal disturbance, or even a disturbance, and I'm not speaking to anyone, a disturbance of seeing ourselves mirrored into something that within us disturbs us. Am I clear? So someone else or some level of compulsory relationship, a husband, wife, a child, this first cycle of family karma of first degree, as we call it. So this could be mirroring to me continuously, or expanding to something to me that I cannot see by myself. So the karma is organized, an aspect that I don't want to see or that I cannot see by myself. So you see, this relationship or about compulsory relationships needs to be reflected by reflections that we don't make generally. That is to ask in this context, what do I have to learn from this? Or what is my collaboration so that this may change its level or degree? Oh well, I do this every day, so continue. Continue. Because everything has a cycle, everything has a rhythm, everything has its moment to be transformed. So one of the laws, let us say, that Jesus brought to us before this evolutionary matrix that is giving up, desistance. It's an evolutionary matrix. When we went to Israel, we have shared with you in the public sharing Figueira and its fruits, there is a superphysical environment called Galileum, and there is a call to the energy of persistence, this matrix which is persistence. Jesus said, the one who persists until the end, this one will be saved. That is, this will take a step beyond that karmic context in which they are inserted. So going back to the context, if we have done everything we could have done, generally it's not like this, but let us say we have to persist. It's not having any effect, but this is a chemistry, a process of interaction, and when the moment, the precise comes for a change of cycle, this will change its point. So if I give up before the moment of generating the best I can collaborate in that chemical relationship, this doesn't take place. So we have to be very careful and we have to be very patient with this process and not give up. Give up on what? On being the best we can be, regardless of the context. But that person doesn't hear me, but it's the other. We are not the ones who have to fail to give an impulse, but it's useless to insist. So do an inner work, do a silent work, reflect on your inner work, reflect if it's not time to do a contact with all the inner beings, not with people here. And again, everything is so disorganized here, so badly influenced, so interfered, that it's really difficult to reach a point of harmony. Well, many ask about this point or don't have an answer about that which we call death. So we need an answer. What is death? Or how life is? Or what is life after this moment we call death? It's a mystery. It's a mystery. Our physical, emotional, and mental selves experience this in a different way from our consciousness. We may have a lot of information about this, but when we experience or live a situation that is similar to that which we call death, we know very well that is very different. The possibility that we imagined that we would have in our consciousness from the real experience there. So, what is the reflection that we do not always make? The first reflection is, are we seeking the essential from each moment for that which we call life? Are we really loving? Loving means to include life just as it comes to us and trying to learn with this at each moment. So this great insecurity or impotency that we feel when we are close to this process of discontinuity of life is because we are not loving and experiencing intensively each moment just as it comes, and always seeking. Here is a recommendation, instruction. The other level, a non-physical level of the situation. So, just as we have a physical body, an emotional and a mental bodies, this present moment also has this physical experience, a moment of an emotional experience and a moment of a mental experience. And when generally this is dissociated, there is no communication, no synthesis, union, communion with all of this, we feel very insecure because we know we don't have control over nothing of this. So this tendency to control, we don't make this reflection generally. So let us observe today, how much have we wanted to control situations today? And all those who have lived situations similar to this discontinuity of life, just as we are calling this here, you see that a total loss of control emerges. We had no control over anything. A different law, a different sort of impulse emerges there. So these reflections on the essence of life, on our higher levels, on the law of reincarnation, are reflections that we cannot deal with them or make these reflections superficially. Otherwise, one day, the cyclic moment that is inevitable to each one of us, we could eventually find us with more consistency, or first a conviction that these other levels exist, and this is why incarnation exists. The symbolic life, the relationship with the life of dream life, the process of the inner levels, inner life, contact with inner life. We gradually re-encounter this conviction that we are part of something that is broader. All these reflections bring the responses that we need. But if we don't give attention to this, we do not know the higher levels of consciousness, only polarized in the appearance of the physical plane. Inevitably, when this moment comes of the impulse of discontinuity of life, which we call death, whichever way we want to understand it, we will have more difficulty in entering this experience. So all of us have this need of response also on that which we call the past, that which has passed, and eventually responses about projections of what we call future. But the reflection about this topic is we make the correct effort to be present in everything. I'm going to give you an example that we are going to identify very well that we are not present. When we are going to talk to someone, for example, even if it's something of the day-to-day or someone that we meet, let us observe ourselves attentively how our attitude today was before this. Generally, it's an automatic attitude, right? Oh, hello, good morning, how are you? But we are not really attentive to others' need. And this lack of attention or this lack of interest, it's a sort of absence. Reflect on this. So, when I become absent in the present moment, not being present, therefore, I do not manage to locate in the present moment that which others need. Not physically and externally and personally, an internal need, because these sharings are in function of inner life, of our evolution, the group evolution, the evolution of humanity, and therefore all of us relate with many people, and you see how many opportunities of help ourselves mutually we lose each day, only by becoming absent countless times during the day when we meet someone. I usually mention that due to the task I have with instruction and with the groups and in the institutional relationships, I had to learn, I had to make the effort with the theme of body language, gaze. Here now in Angola, for example, we were talking to some people and I saw how during the conversation people would change their gaze 3, 4, 5 times. In the East, this is very much known, the yoga of gaze or diagnosis through gaze. It's not magic, it's through the gaze, the soul of the individual or the world of the individual finds a window of communication. So we see ourselves mutually countless times, many times, and familiarity, oh, I know this person. You don't know. Who knows the other person in a healthy consciousness? So see how careful we have to be with this theme of past and future, with this becoming absent from the present. So we cannot know the past and we can really anticipate that which we call future, creating a best condition, a karmic condition of expansion of consciousness if we are continuously becoming absent. Only because we despise others' potential, including what do we know of others to despise them? Of course, it's a strong word, despise, but still it is. If I am with someone and in my mental consciousness, in my filter, I am already responding. When I meet this person, I have a series of talks of prejudices. We call this prejudice about someone else. I can never learn with them. I can never help them because I have a thick, dark, slow layer. It's slow, it's not malleable, it's not plastic of prejudice. It doesn't allow me to understand that moment where this individual has come and where this evolutionary situation of the individual is going to. How can I enter the evolutionary impulse at that moment? That moment I met that individual for this to have a constructive development, and it's not a reconfirmation of a mistaken trajectory. So you see how many times a day we lose the opportunity of evolving. So the reflection is, let us not be tied to the past, because this is very strong. And let us not create expectations of the future, because this relationship of what is here and that is walking to the side, this relationship can only happen at this precise moment. No other moment will exist like this. And we will not be able to help ourselves, each other, and help others if we are continuously absent. So this response on how to deal with the past and the future is a reflection on how I am present and how I become absent at each moment. There is something that is very difficult, which is the process of ability of listening, because generally we don't listen. We are just responding to what others are saying. I will end up responding to my tendency, but not to what others need eventually. So if I am absent, listening is not a process of processing and eventually perceive how to make this a dialogue, a construction with true dialogue. So you see how we need to evolve in all of this. With daily situations, there is no complication, no technique, no formula or mantra or anything that is transcendent. No, it's just life as God has given it to us, daily life, which constantly brings us all these occasions and opportunities for us to be able to evolve. To conclude, we are going to move on to some difficulties in this process that could help us to watch, to keep vigil. Because oftentimes many say, I don't know what is my decision before something. We reflect a lot, but let us say what is the posture. I don't know where to walk to. Okay, but perhaps knowing what we should not do, what we could avoid, is also a way to open a window to perceive what is correct. So one of the difficulties of this process is, for example, impulsiveness and superficiality. So this impedes us to implant in us a healthy state, a peaceful state of really being present. And when we are present entire, this receptive, reflexive state, this margin of wisdom begins to naturally emerge. When I am in peace, life comes, events come, and I'm there in this decision of not being impulsive or superficial. So let us reflect. Today, up to this moment, have I been superficial? Have I been impulsive? Have I been present at each moment? And we will see honestly that yes, generally yes. So I'll be more attentive to be more present and discover, because there is a virgin space at each moment that we don't take advantage of, a space that is profoundly creative, and this creative space comes from an unknown region. But when someone comes to say something and I mobilize all my prejudice about what this individual is saying, this virgin creative region does not emerge. So I'm always dealing with a dirty clothes, warmed up food, not this virgin potential that will make others' potential emerge. So let us avoid impulsiveness and superficiality. A very impactful point is tendency to fear and escape from reality. So we all ask, am I adhering to a character, an artificial character? Am I nourishing disguise, a mask? Remember the sharing about the 12 fears. One of the fears is fear to judgment, to opinions. Do I have this fear? do I behave with this fear always pushing me not to be authentic, not being and expressing what I can be at this moment? Of course, within an ethic of good sense of human and social relationships. But there is a thermometer there. I want to be authentic, genuine. We are in this work of expansion of consciousness, but this does not mean fear or escape from reality itself. So let us ask ourselves, do I envelop myself with a character, in a character, or out of fear to escape my own reality, to please someone, to be accepted? So you see how this theme of social networks could represent an evil in this context, when this whole thought form obliges people to be what they are not. That is not even in the project of life for them, in the schedule for their incarnation, with behaviors, with ways of, with appearances. So you see the degree of evolutionary energy that entered the planet after the Second World War, and the risk that all of us live today for not being present and knowing our inner worlds. Another point of this difficulty is lack of attention to responses and signs that life could be bringing to us at each moment. So being disattentive. So today we receive impulses from many points, conscious and unconscious points. It's a rain of impulses. So what is polarized in our consciousness? We could ask ourselves, am I attracting that which I need before my moment of learning experience, or am I attracting all these characters that do not correspond to me, or artificial things that do not correspond to me? So we are all mixed, and this lack of attention, in this lack of attention, we become disattentive. And in this lack of attention, we do not manage to see the potential that exists to something involved in this situation. No, but I have reached the limit. I know it. I no longer know where to go now. So observe if there isn't a space of virgin consciousness within this that could make light emerge or resignify this. Because if it's happening again, or if it's still happening, there is a learning experience that we have not assimilated there, correct? Otherwise, it wouldn't be learning, it wouldn't be happening again. So if it's knocking on our door again, it's because there is still something to be explored there. So this lack of attention makes it difficult or even impedes us to see the potential of each moment. Then, lastly, attachment to your own perspectives and resistance to see other aspects of a same situation. So oftentimes, life or situations are leading us to compose a puzzle, but it's showing us from a place that we cannot see because our perspective and resistance makes us see from a different point. So this flexibility, this openness to see from other perspectives, other angles is very important. Now, it's possible, the thermometer of this process, for us not to become lost in a naive and fragile openness to listening and accepting anything, which determines what we are going to attract from other perspectives is our love for truth. So we are before a situation, a person, any situation, and the search for the truth of that, for the solution of that, for this to go through a synthesis and find again a next step, the love and decision to really deal with the truth is what's going to attract, at the same proportion, a perspective of truth also, that perhaps I'm not managing to see for some reason. Now, this is only possible when we are working on that which is called as humility, which is our accepting our consciousness just as it is, without having ambition for something beyond what we are, and not enter victimism, which is a false pride, and placing ourselves below that which we could be. Saint John of the Cross used to say, humility is the point of the present moment in which we are. We are, and that's it, just as we are. It's like living here now, going outside, there is a pavement, there's a flower there, and in the consciousness of the flower, it's not complaining that it doesn't have neighbors, other flowers, and that is in the concrete, it's not close to the river, having to deal with smoke and everything. No, it's the flower, just every flower. So this humility of present moment, this is why it's difficult, is what allows us to leave the state of attachment for us to be able to learn. So detachment, that seems to be something very obvious in our evolution, is not. In the East, in the most point, one of the most important points, detachment, we have conviction that everything is in a movement of continuous transformation. So this continuous mosaic formed with life, there will always be many angles for us to perceive and understand. Very well, responses that we all need, reflections that we do not always make. So this is an interesting content, it seems to me, for all of us. Who knows if in our day-to-day we think about something that could be brought to our practice. It's not a practice, it's a way of living, it's a search of life made in a parallel way to all our daily activities, because it's something that has nothing to do with stopping doing anything. All the opposite. The more we interact, the more opportunity we have to develop all of this. So no one has excuse to not be able to do this experience. So we will also continue with the theme of dreams and symbolic life, the theme of the 3-month cycles, and offering contents for the awakening and expansion of our consciousness. Thank you very much for being together here, and let's continue. Good night, and thank you all.